Personas y que esta comunidad siga creciendo, música. My name is Javier, and I'm 45 years old. My name is Javier, and I'm 45 years old. I was born in Jalisco, but I've lived in Mexico City for many years. My story begins when my father died, and my mother decided to return to Jalisco. I, being a teenager, decided to stay in the city to find my own path. From a very young age, I learned to be a taxi driver. At first it wasn't easy, but over time I became well known in this city. People liked to take my taxi because I always had a smile and good conversation. My work as a taxi driver allowed me to meet many people and hear their stories. I was married once, but the marriage didn't work out and I got divorced. I don't have children, which is why my taxi has become my life companion. Despite the loneliness, I enjoyed my work. Every morning I would wake up early, then go out to find clients to take to their destinations. That's how I began to notice my neighbor Maria. Maria was a very beautiful woman with dark hair and a smile that lit up everything around her. I saw her every morning while she took her children to school. I couldn't help feeling attracted to her, but I knew Maria was married to a man who didn't treat her well. Her husband was a violent, bad-tempered man. Despite my interest in Maria, I knew there wasn't much I could do. She had her life, and I had mine. However, I couldn't stop thinking about her and how different her life would be if she were with me. But well, that's just a fantasy. Life went on its course. Each day was the same as the last, until one day I met a woman named Renata who took me to a place that would change my life forever. The routine of days. My days always began the same. I would wake up early when the city was still asleep. Driving a taxi is quite an adventure. Every day is a surprise. You never know who you'll meet or what stories you'll hear. Some passengers are talkative, others more reserved, but each one has something to tell, and I enjoyed being that attentive ear. However, what I looked forward to most each morning was seeing Maria when I left my building. Almost always I would find her taking her children to school. Maria had something special, something I couldn't ignore. She was a small, slender woman with dark hair and eyes that reflected a mixture of sadness and hope. Her smile, when it appeared, was like a ray of sun on a cloudy day. I would see her walking with her children, holding their hands, always so patient and affectionate with them. I was intrigued by how such a sweet woman could be married to such an unpleasant man. Her husband frequently yelled at her and humiliated her in public, and I felt deep rage seeing how he treated her. I didn't understand how someone could be so cruel to such a wonderful person as Maria. Little by little, I started looking for excuses to run into her. If I saw her leaving, I would slow my pace or pretend to be busy with my car, just to be able to see her a little longer. Sometimes our eyes would meet, and she would give me a shy smile that would make my entire day. I felt there was something between us, a silent connection that neither of us mentioned. Although I knew I shouldn't, I began to fantasize about the idea of being with her. I imagined what her life would be like if she were by my side, without that horrible man who made her suffer. I thought about how I could make her happy, how we could form a family together. Every night when I returned to my apartment, those thoughts accompanied me. I dreamed of Maria, of the possibility that someday she could be mine. But I knew they were just that, dreams. She was married, and had a life she couldn't easily change. My interest in Maria grew more each day. I couldn't help it. Something inside me told me she was special, that somehow our destinies were intertwined. And although I tried to convince myself that I should forget her, I couldn't stop thinking about her. And so, between work and my thoughts about Maria, my days passed one after another, until one day everything changed unexpectedly. The unexpected encounter. It was a day like any other. I had woken up early, made my coffee, and started my taxi. I was already on the street looking for passengers and thinking about Maria when a woman got into my car. It was Renata, a woman who seemed very nervous and worried. "Sir, I need you to take me to this place as quickly as possible," she said as she handed me a paper with an address. I looked at the address and immediately knew it was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. I felt a chill but also a curiosity I couldn't ignore. "Miss, that place is quite dangerous. Going there is almost like a death sentence. Are you sure you want to go?" I asked, hoping she would change her mind. Renata nodded with determination. "Yes, I know, but it's very important. Whatever it costs, just take me there." I started the taxi, and we headed toward the neighborhood. Finally, we arrived at a house that looked like it was about to collapse. Outside, there was a line of people waiting to enter. Renata paid me and asked me to wait for her. "Please wait here. I'll pay you well for your time," she said, and disappeared into the crowd. I parked nearby, made myself comfortable, and began flipping through some old magazines I had in the car. Time passed slowly, but after almost an hour and a half, Renata returned. She seemed calmer and asked me to take her back. On the way back, my curiosity got the better of me, and I asked her what was in that house. Renata smiled and answered without hesitation. "That's where Donna Lupita lives, a very powerful healer. She does all kinds of work, from healings to love spells. She's very well known for helping people when no one else can." My ears perked up. I had always been skeptical about witchcraft, but Renata's words resonated in my mind. "Can she really help with anything?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, anything. If you need help with love, she can do it. Just go and tell her you come recommended by me, Renata, Juana's daughter." I stored that information like a treasure. The decision. After dropping Renata at her destination, I couldn't stop thinking about what she had told me. Could Donna Lupita really help me win over Maria? The idea seemed absurd, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. The days passed and my mind remained occupied with that idea. Finally, one Saturday morning, I decided I had nothing to lose by trying. I headed to Donna Lupita's house, determined to find out if everything Renata had told me was true. When I arrived, the line of people was already there. I waited my turn patiently until finally it was my turn to enter. Donna Lupita was a small, elderly woman with surprising energy for her age. She looked at me with penetrating eyes and gestured for me to sit down. "How can I help you, my son?" she asked in a soft but firm voice. I told her everything about Maria, about how I felt, and how I wished to be with her. Donna Lupita listened attentively, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she looked at me seriously. "If you really want to be with her, there is a price to pay. Witchcraft is not a game, and there are always consequences," she warned. Despite her words, I was determined. I assured her I was willing to pay whatever price was necessary. She asked me to write down on paper the desires I had for Maria. I did so, and she performed a ritual with the paper, burning it and scattering the ashes into a small black pouch. "Now take these ashes and scatter them wherever she walks. She will be yours. But remember, if you break your promise, you will pay the price," she said as she handed me the small pouch. I left there with my heart beating fast, a mixture of excitement and fear. I couldn't wait to see if the spell would work. And so my life began to change in a way I never would have imagined. The turning point. After my visit to Donna Lupita, my days continued with their usual routine. However, a sense of anticipation took hold of me every time I saw Maria. I knew I had planted the seeds of something bigger, something that would change our lives. One morning while I was preparing my taxi to go to work, I heard desperate knocks on my door. I opened quickly and, to my surprise, there was Maria with her youngest son at her side. Her eyes were red from crying, and her voice trembled when she spoke to me. "Good morning, Javier. I'm so sorry to bother you like this, but I need your help urgently," she said, as a tear rolled down her cheek. "My husband, he passed away yesterday in a work accident. I need you to take care of the funeral arrangements. I talked to my family and friends, but everyone turned their backs on me. I have no one else to turn to." My heart tightened seeing the pain in her eyes, but I also knew this was my opportunity to be close to her. "Don't worry, Maria. I'm here to help you with whatever you need. Come on, get in the car," I said, trying to sound calm and strong for her. On the way, Maria told me the details of the accident. Her husband, who worked as a quality inspector in a factory, had been crushed by some poorly stored machinery. The scene had been so horrible that the authorities had shown her photos for identification. As she spoke, her tears didn't stop, and I felt a mixture of compassion and rage for everything she had suffered. We arrived at the government office, and I accompanied her every step of the way. I was by her side as she filled out forms and spoke with officials, offering the support she so desperately needed. Seeing her vulnerability and her strength at the same time made me admire her even more. A new beginning. After the funeral, our lives intertwined naturally. Maria thanked me endlessly for my help, and little by little we began to see each other more often. Every time we were together, I felt the bond between us strengthening. One day, while we were having breakfast and her children were already in school, I gathered the courage to confess my feelings. "Maria, there's something I need to tell you," I began, feeling my heart beat strongly. "I know your husband's death is recent, and that it might seem inappropriate, but I can't keep this inside any longer. I really like you. In fact, I'm in love with you. I want to be with you and make you happy. I want to be the man who takes care of you and loves you." To my surprise, Maria didn't pull away. Instead, she took my hands and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Javier, you've been an incredible support for me and my children. I've also realized that I feel something very strong for you. I didn't know if it was right, but now I know that I love you too." We hugged each other tightly and kissed for the first time. It was a moment full of love and relief, as if everything we had been through had led us to that instant. From that day on, our relationship flourished. Although Maria and I had our reservations, we knew we were destined to be together. However, we would soon discover that not everything would be easy. The strange events that began to occur made us question whether the spirit of Maria's deceased husband had truly rested in peace. The supernatural presence. Over time, Maria and I began to build a life together. It was wonderful being with her, and I felt I had finally found my soulmate. Soon we realized that our happiness wouldn't be so easy to achieve. It all started with small incidents. One night while we were having dinner at her house, the dining room lamp exploded without any apparent reason. The loud noise scared us so much that we almost fell off our chairs. We both tried to downplay it, but deep down we knew something strange was happening. Another day, we were watching television in the living room when one of the pictures on the wall suddenly fell. There was no draft or vibrations that could have caused it. Maria looked at me with eyes full of worry, and I knew she also felt that something wasn't right. The situation worsened when we started hearing knocks on the door at night. They were soft but insistent sounds, as if someone was trying to get our attention. Every time we opened the door, there was no one there. These experiences began to affect us, especially Maria, who was very nervous and scared. One night while we were in bed, we clearly heard footsteps in the hallway. We stayed motionless, listening carefully. The footsteps approached our room and then stopped right in front of the door. I gathered my courage and threw the door open, but there was no one there. I felt a chill run through my body and knew we weren't alone. That's when I had a terrifying dream. In the dream, Maria's deceased husband, with an expression of hatred on his face, accused me of having betrayed him and stolen his family. He told me he would never rest in peace and would do everything possible to prevent Maria and me from being together. I woke up sweating and with my heart beating strongly, feeling that there was something very real in that dream. I decided to talk to Dona Lupita to understand what was happening. I returned to her house and told her everything we had experienced. Dona Lupita looked at me seriously and said, "When you do witchcraft work, there are always consequences. The spirit of that man is not at peace and is trying to protect what was his. You must be very careful, Javier." Her words filled me with fear, but also with determination. I didn't want to lose Maria for anything in the world. Dona Lupita gave me a protection amulet and taught me some prayers to calm the restless spirit. I returned home and told Maria what Dona Lupita had told me. We decided to follow her advice and stay strong. The supernatural events continued. One night while Maria and I were together in bed, we felt a presence in the room. The air turned cold and the lights flickered. Suddenly, we saw the silhouette of Maria's husband in the corner of the room, looking at us with hatred. Maria started to cry, and I felt a mixture of fear and rage. "Leave us in peace!" I shouted, but the figure didn't move. I remembered the prayers Dona Lupita had taught me and began to recite them out loud. Little by little, the figure began to fade until it finally disappeared. That night, Maria and I hugged each other tightly, promising to stay united no matter what. The figure disappeared, leaving us with a mixture of relief and tension. Although the supernatural events diminished, we knew that the spirit of Maria's husband was still present, watching us. And although strange occurrences still happened from time to time, we got used to them and continued forward. We got engaged to be married and planned a small wedding, excited about our future together. I worked more hours than ever to save money and give Maria and her children the life they deserved. My days were long and exhausting, but every time I saw Maria's smile, I felt it was worth it. However, life had other plans for me. The accident. One night, I received a call from a regular client who needed an urgent trip to a neighboring city. Despite how late it was, I accepted the job because the payment would be good. I picked up my passenger, and we headed toward the destination. The highway was dark and deserted, and fatigue began to affect me. As I drove, I noticed that my passenger was a kind, talkative man. We talked about many things, and the conversation made the trip seem shorter. Upon reaching his destination, the man paid me generously and gave me a warning that left me uneasy. "Be very careful on your way back. I don't know why, but I have a bad feeling," he said, looking at me with concern. I thanked him for his words and began my return trip. I was exhausted, and the silence in the taxi was overwhelming. Shortly after getting on the highway, I began to feel overwhelming sleep. I fought to stay awake, drinking water and opening the windows, but nothing seemed to work. Suddenly, the taxi lights began to flicker, and the air turned incredibly cold. I felt a dark presence in the passenger seat. Glancing sideways, I saw the silhouette of Maria's husband looking at me with intense hatred. Fear paralyzed me, and before I realized it, I lost control of the vehicle. The taxi went off the road and fell into a ditch. The last thing I remember is the sound of twisting metal and intense pain before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. My body was wrapped in bandages, and I felt stabbing pain throughout my entire being. I realized I had lost my legs in the accident. The physical pain was unbearable, but the emotional pain was even worse. I knew my life had changed forever. In those moments of solitude and suffering, I reflected on everything that had happened. I remembered my visit to Dona Lupita and the warnings about the consequences of using witchcraft. I realized I had played with forces I didn't fully understand, and that now I was paying the price. Everything I had done to be with Maria seemed insignificant compared to the pain and loss I now faced. I thought about Maria and how this would affect our relationship. I didn't want to be a burden to her or her children. Maria came to see me at the hospital every day. Her eyes reflected a mixture of love and sadness. She told me she loved me and that my condition didn't matter, but I knew our life together would be very difficult. One morning, with tears in my eyes, I told her I had to let her go. "Maria, I can't do this to you. I can't be a burden to you and your children. You deserve a better life without this weight." She cried and tried to convince me otherwise, but I had made my decision. A new life. Now I live in a small room, selling candies and anything I can to survive. I constantly reflect on my decisions and the consequences of my actions. Witchcraft had given me what I wanted, but at too high a price. I move forward, carrying the weight of my mistakes and trying to find peace in a world that seems to have none. But I still have hope that someday Maria will find the happiness she always deserved. After the accident and my decision to distance myself from Maria, my life changed drastically. I went from being an independent, hard-working man to depending on a wheelchair and living in a small rented room. I was determined not to give up, to move forward despite the difficulties. Every morning I woke up early as I always had, but now instead of starting my taxi, I prepared for a day of selling candies on the streets. It was humble work, but it gave me the opportunity to stay busy and earn some money to survive. I often thought about Maria and the children I had left behind. I wondered how they were doing, if they had found the peace and happiness they so deserved. Sometimes doubts assailed me, questioning if I had made the right decision by distancing myself. But I knew in my heart that I had done it for their own good, so as not to be a burden in their lives. The days passed. Routine became my refuge, a way to avoid thinking too much about what I had lost. But at night, when the city calmed down and silence fell, my thoughts inevitably returned to Maria and what we could have had together. One day, while I was selling candies on a busy corner, I saw a woman who looked familiar. It was Renata, the same woman who had taken me to meet Dona Lupita. She recognized me instantly and approached to greet me. "Javier? I can't believe it's you. What happened to you?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I told her everything that had happened since our last encounter, including the accident and my decision to distance myself from Maria. Renata listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "Javier, you did what you thought was best. But you can't live in the past. You have to find a way to move forward." Her words resonated with a wisdom I hadn't expected. That conversation with Renata made me reflect. I understood that I had been living in a limbo, trapped between regret and resignation. I decided I needed to do something more with my life, something that would give me a purpose beyond simply surviving. Finding purpose. Over time, I began to help others who were in similar situations to mine. I started visiting hospitals and rehabilitation centers, sharing my story and offering support to those who needed it. I discovered that by helping others, I found a new way to heal my own wounds. Life didn't become easier, but I found a new strength within myself. I understood that the decisions I had made, although painful, had led me to where I was now. And although I still miss Maria, I knew I had done the right thing by letting her go. My story is a life lesson. I learned that playing with forces we don't understand can have devastating consequences. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way to find the light. Sometimes that means accepting our mistakes, learning from them, and moving forward. Now, as I travel the city streets in my wheelchair, I know my life has a different purpose. It's no longer just about what I lost, but about what I can give to others. And that, ultimately, gives me the peace I had so sought. Thank you very much for reaching the end of the video. If you liked the story, leave a comment below. I will respond to everyone. Subscribe to the channel. It helps us reach more people and allows this community to continue growing.